Welcome to the writer reads The Strays of Lunar One, Book 2, The Unwanted, Chapter 13, Shanghaied. A coffin crate was almost as bad as dry stasis, Oliver decided. He rolled out of the disintegrating shell, hitting the floor on all fours. A groan was all the warning he got before Lewis landed beside him and started throwing up. And that was all it took. The pair of them made an unholy chorus for several minutes, regardless of how much they tried to stop or suppress the noise they made. The experience left them as weak as kittens, and they leaned on each other when it was over, their skins sheened in sweat. Skins. Oliver looked at Lewis, registering his bare shoulder and arms. Those fucking horse sons, cursed, his beater muttered as he looked back, and Oliver didn't have the energy to do more than agree. We need to move, he began, just as a pair of boots rounded the corner ahead of them. Oliver struggled to lift his head and follow the line of boots up a pair of ship-suited calves and thighs to a heavily belted waist. Oh, fuck. Well, aren't you two a right mess? The crewman asked, but she didn't seem surprised to see them. I was wondering when you'd wake up. Oliver crouched back on his haunches and then realized his lack of clothing didn't just apply to his torso. The crewman caught the mortification on his face and laughed. Don't be shy, big guy. I've pretty much seen it all. She looked down at the puddle he and Lewis had created, indicating it with the toe of her boot. Although that is particularly impressive. Oliver just stared at her, a myriad of questions racing through his skull as she looked back, but not able to articulate a single one. The crewman returned his gaze, letting him register the blaster she carried, the tool belt strapped to her waist, and the fact she was waiting for the two crewmen who rounded the corner a few seconds later. They were two of the biggest humans he'd ever seen, and he'd seen a few. Some of the men and women in Crucible had rivaled Wares for build and size. And aggression, he added silently. Let's not forget that. The first thing the crewmen did was vac the puddle of puke from the deck and hand their fellow crewmen the machine once they were done. Be a gem, would you, and traipse that back to Bio? One asked, and she nodded. Since you're asking so nicely, she replied, I think I get the better part of the deal, anyway. Looks like you got two sick shapeshifters with a real allergy to old stasis crates on your hands. One of the men snorted. I'd bet neither one of them does real good in dry stasis, either. Nope, Oliver croaked. Why, they tried crates. He rested his elbows on his knees, and they exchanged glances. You think you can stand? I can try, Oliver replied, pushing himself upright. He nudged Lewis. Want to help me? Lewis stopped leaning on him. Nope, you got this. I'm staying right here. I got this, Oliver repeated, and promptly proved he didn't. He made it off his knees and grabbed the crate nearest him for support. His arm refused to help. His hand slipped, and he stumbled sideways, tripping over Lewis and ending back up on the floor, nursing a cracked wrist. How many times do I have to tell you not to step on me? Lewis grumbled. Oliver stared at him. You're worse than a cat, he finally managed, and yelped as the crewman pulled him to his feet and propped him against the wall. Don't move, he ordered, and Oliver blinked, wondering exactly how he was meant to comply with that when the world insisted on pulling him sideways. He was caught and shoved back upright as the crewman spoke into his comms. Cap, we're going to need some help down here. Seems we've got two wolves who can't hold their stasis meds. Oliver curled his lip. Can't hold my... His stomach rolled, and he didn't have the time or strength to warn the crewman to get out of the way. Nice, the man said, looking down at his sodden uniform. He let Oliver slide to his knees. Real nice. Stacy, bring the vac back, his partner rattled into the comms. They're not done yet. Seriously? The woman asked. What the hell did those boys put in the meds? I don't know, but I think we need the doc. Stacy glanced at his uniform and then down at the second puddle. Roger that, she said, and made a call. The ship's doctor arrived shortly after, and she wasn't impressed. Someone gave a mixed Lupari Ware-Cross ancient Someone gave a mixed Lupari Ware-Cross Ancient stasis meds designed for humans, she said, stating the facts as though she was talking to an idiot. No wonder Odyssey want to put a crew training school down there. Accidents like this are just waiting to happen. Oliver had remained crouched on the floor, but his stomach had subsided, so he carefully pushed onto his feet. The nearest crewman grabbed his arm and helped him rise. You good now? Oliver started to nod, felt his stomach roll, and changed it to a shake. Clamping down on the urge to throw up what wasn't there, he closed his eyes and waited for it to go away. When it did, he glanced at the crewman. Is there somewhere I can go clean up? At his words, Lewis lurched to his feet. Me too? The doctor wrinkled her nose. When they're done, stow them in their quarters and come get me. I'll need a couple of days to get them right. The captain can take it out of their wages. Wages? Oliver didn't remember being hired. The doctor gave him a mirthless smile. Conditions for stowaways, she told him. We get a few. That was news to Oliver, but he didn't have much to say about it. Instead, he just nodded, grateful they weren't being spaced or handed over. Uh-huh. She gave them one last look and turned away. I want them in their bunks in 30 minutes, she ordered. The crewman closest Oliver snorted and pulled his arm over his shoulders. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. His colleague did the same for Lewis, grimacing as he pulled the man closer. Yeah, before the doc has our hides. I'll just get this, shall I? Stacy sniped, but she didn't sound like she really cared, and the noise of the vac followed them out of the cargo hold. Damned wolves. Dip. The doctor's verdict was The doctor's verdict was they needed to rehydrate and then they needed to sleep. You do those two things, she told Oliver, and we'll think about feeding you. You'll not keep anything down otherwise. Yes, Doc, he agreed, checking Lewis was okay. The man had a wary look to his eye and a stubborn set to his jaw, but he nodded. Gotcha. Oliver watched him until Lewis rolled onto his side and relaxed. The crewman standing at the end of the cabin pushed off the wall. You too, he told Oliver, and Oliver closed his eyes. Sure. Apart from Lewis, the cabin was empty when he woke. 2 1-litre water bottles stood in an alcove beside the bed, with one terse command stuck to their sides. Drink. Glancing across the room, Oliver noted another 2 at the head of Lewis's bed. He nudged his beater and gestured to them. You heard them. Lewis gave the bottles a dubious look. If I drink that much, I'm going to bring it up again. You might be surprised, Oliver told him, picking up one of his own bottles. Reluctantly, his beater followed suit, and they sat, sipping carefully in companionable silence. It wasn't water, but a tangy sweet mix that soothed their abused insides and slid into their systems in double-quick time. Doc knows his stuff, Lewis commented, finishing the first bottle and reaching for the second. Yep, Oliver agreed, looking round. Holding the second bottle in his hand, he got up, glad to find none of the dizziness from the day before. With the world holding steady, he tried the door. Locked, he said, and sat back down on the edge of his bed. He sighed. Guess we get to finish these and go back to sleep. You better hope they really do want us working, Lewis told him darkly. Oliver regarded him carefully. We didn't get found by accident, he told the man. My bet is we're not the first runaways those farmers have moved. Lewis wrinkled his brow. What did they mean when they said, do you think they know? Oliver shrugged. Not a clue. He glanced around the cabin. I sure hope it doesn't come back to bite us. Lewis finished his second flask and set it carefully back in the alcove. Cabin's got no Wi-Fi, he commented, meaning he couldn't hack their way out, which meant he'd tried. Oliver watched as his beater stretched out on the bed. We might as well get some sleep, boss. Whatever comes, right? He closed his eyes, and Oliver saw his breathing deepen into sleep. Finishing his own flask, he followed Lewis's example. Whatever comes, he agreed, sinking into unconsciousness. He was shaken awake some time later, rolling back and away from the man stooping over him and cocking his fist before his eyes were properly open. The man took 2 hasty steps back. "Easy there, big fella. Captain wants to see you." Oliver propped, leaning against the wall as he slowly lowered his fist. His eyes flickered to where Lewis was warily coming upright. The 2 crewmen backed toward the door. "We'll wait for you outside," said the man who'd woken Oliver, and they did exactly that. "Where to?" Oliver asked gruffly when he emerged, and the crewmen turned, beckoning for them to follow. Oliver glanced at Lewis. "Not very talkative," he noted. Lewis shrugged. "If you'd just Shanghaied 2 complete strangers, would you be?" Point. Oliver frowned when they reached the distinctive security doors of the ship's command center. "What are we doing here?" The crewman gave him a slight smile as he palmed the access panel. "Captain's not the only one who wants to speak with you." "This cannot be good," Lewis commented. Oliver took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. "Let's get it done." They moved 3 steps into the control room before they registered who was watching them from the forward view screen. Oliver's stride hitched and Lewis came to a dead stop, his whispered "son of a bit" saying it all. Oliver reached out and slapped a hand over his beater's mouth before grabbing the man by the arm and pulling him down as he dropped to one knee. "Star Shadow," he said, greeting the tall young man on the screen as respectfully as he knew how. He knew it wouldn't make up for Lewis's outburst, but he had to hope it would make a difference. The Star Shadow air's opening reply let him know how much trouble he was in. "Where is my she?" Lewis's head snapped up and he shot a shocked glance at Oliver. "We returned her." "You did not?" The cub's voice was cold. "You sent a message stating her whereabouts. When we arrived, she was gone." He held up Alan's sword and blaster. "These were all that remained." Oliver heard movement as Lewis shuffled close to his side, but after glancing up to see what the cub referred to, he bowed his head again. "We are sorry, Star Shadow. That was not our intent." "And what was your intent?" snarled around them, drawing gasps from the humans on the bridge. Lewis kept his eyes on the screen, but he grabbed Oliver's bicep in a grip like iron and answered before Oliver could stop him. "To return her once we'd realized our mistake." "Mistake!" the boy barked, and Lewis flinched. Oliver raised his head in time to see the boy's eyes narrow. "Explain." This time, when Lewis went to speak, Oliver silenced him by placing a hand on his knee. "This is my responsibility," he said, rising slowly to his feet but pressing Lewis back to his knees when he went to follow. "I am Alpha." That remark drew the boy's attention, and his wolf-grey eyes focused on Oliver's face. "Speak," he barked, and Oliver stretched a hand toward Lewis, ordering his beater to stay where he was. For his own part, he lifted his chin, his lips curling in a half snarl. "I am Alpha," he rumbled. "My sins are my own." The boy's mouth compressed in a thin straight line, and then he denied the claim. "If you are Alpha, then he is Beta, and his counsel is lacking. I still hold him responsible." Oliver took a breath and let it out in a sigh, lowering his head briefly in acknowledgement. He stopped short of submissive, but it was hard. The last thing he wanted was to show the child defiance, but weakness wasn't desirable either. "I will pay his price," he stated, straightening his spine and coming to face the young Lupar. The boy's face twisted with scorn. "You cannot die twice, Exile." Behind him, Oliver heard Lewis groan, and it was all he could do not to hang his head in defeat. "Who says we need to die at all?" "I know where you are." "That does not mean you cannot leave us," Oliver began, but the cub's face hardened, and all Oliver saw was the descendant of a long line of warrior lords. "My she," the boy repeated in a tone of iron. "Where is she?" I will tell you what we know, Oliver replied, our guilt, our repentance, and our intent, but I cannot give you the answer you seek. Cannot? The boy asked softly. Or will not? If I knew, you would also, Oliver answered. May I speak? It will not absolve your guilt, the boy snarled, and Oliver knelt. I do not expect it to, but if my knowledge assists in the return of your she, that is all that matters. That brought the boy's head up, and Oliver sensed pricked ears. The captain of the damsel will remove your beater out of hearing, and I will hear from him next. Please, Oliver began. Let him stay. He will correct my mistakes. The cub's mouth twisted into a snarl, but before he could reply the captain intervened. We have a helmet which would prevent him from seeing or hearing anything, she offered, if that is acceptable. A slave helm? The cub asked, and his eyes blazed with interest. And why would a produce carrier be equipped with that? Some of our stowaways are not as cooperative as others, the captain replied in a hard tone. We ensure they can do the ship no harm, and are able to pay the price of their passage. You sell them, the cub concluded, and she nodded. We do? And these? He asked, indicating Oliver and Lewis. Appeared willing to work in return for their transport. So you'd have released them at journey's end? The cub asked, and the captain met his eye. We would. We are produce carriers by choice, not slavers. Those you sell would argue the fact, the cub pointed out. Thieves have no rights, she returned. We are produce carriers, not weaklings to be taken advantage of. You have settled the question in your head, the cub observed. The captain inclined her head. We have. Then hood him. I'll wait. It was an order, implicit in which was the idea that he would not wait for long. The captain snapped her fingers, and crewmen brought the helmet. Lewis shot Oliver an imploring look just before it was placed over his head, and Oliver was glad to see the crewmen who escorted them now stood alongside his beater, letting him feel their presence. Lewis sighed and leant against the man's leg, his hands touching the deck for orientation. Seeing the beater was blind and deaf, the cub said, Kill him. Oliver spun to defend his friend, but Lewis didn't move. Before anyone else had time to do more than gape, the cub spoke again. Leave him. Let him live. He returned his attention to Oliver. Now I know he cannot hear.